In 1922, Carl Jung treated a brilliant patient who had just experienced a profound spiritual awakening. She studied all the masters, meditated daily, finally saw through the illusion of the ego. 6 weeks later, she was paralyzed in bed, completely unmotivated to do anything. Jung discovered something disturbing. This wasn't depression. It was something he called the psychological death of the ego. And the scariest part, most people who awaken never recover their vital energy because they don't understand what's happening in their own psyche. Today, I'm going to reveal exactly what Jung discovered about this phase, why your motivation disappeared after awakening, and how to transform this emptiness into the greatest spiritual evolution you've ever had. The pattern Jung identified in his patients looks like this. You had a massive spiritual insight. You saw through the illusion, the social games, the rat race. At first, it was liberating, even empowering. But then something strange happened. That sense of meaning simply evaporated. Not dramatically, quietly, as if your soul had turned down the volume of life and forgotten to turn it back up. That patient of Jung's was exactly like this. Extremely intelligent, she studied Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She had a profound awakening after a devastating existential crisis. She saw through the ego, the search for external validation, the entire social construct. And 6 weeks later, she was paralyzed in bed, unable to do anything. She told Jung something he never forgot. I used to suffer from not achieving enough. Now I don't care if I achieve anything. I thought awakening would light me up, not turn me off. Jung realized he wasn't dealing with clinical depression. He was witnessing the collapse of the ego-based motivation system, a process he considered essential, but that no one at the time understood. And here's what most people don't know. This emptiness isn't the end, it's the portal. Jung said a phrase that changes everything. Enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. This sounds beautiful until you understand what it really means. Awakening isn't the happy ending. It's the beginning of a psychological death, the death of who you thought you were, the structures that gave meaning to your life goals, career, relationships, even your sense of time. Everything starts to crumble. But here's the catch that nobody tells you. Jung would say your ego hasn't disappeared. It's confused. It's lost the map. And without a new map, motivation evaporates. So it's not that you're depressed or have lost your will. You're in psychological limbo. You've woken up from something, but you haven't yet woken up to something new. But before I reveal what's really happening in your psyche, I need to tell you something. If you're living through this right now, this video didn't show up for you by accident. There are 47 more videos on the channel, breaking down Jung individuation and the post-awakening path. If you don't subscribe now, the algorithm will show you random content and you'll miss the complete sequence that can transform this emptiness into purpose. So click subscribe and leave a like so this content reaches more people navigating the same process you are. So you're floating in this post-awakening fog, wondering where your spark went. And here's the truth nobody told you. You're not lost. You're going through a psychological reprogramming that Jung called individuation. And 90% of people stop right here, mistaking transformation for paralysis. This is fascinating and deeply misunderstood. What you're feeling now isn't failure. It's not depression or anxiety in the clinical sense. It's something ancestral and sacred. Jung warned that our modern world avoids this phase at all costs. This sacred pause, this emptiness, this in-between place. He believed it was essential for true individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self. But nobody prepares you for this part. And that's exactly what we need to break down now. Let me explain what's really happening. Throughout your entire life, your motivation came from a specific source, your ego identity, the I you thought you were. You wanted to prove your worth, be recognized, succeed, be loved. This isn't wrong. It's basic human development. Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to function in the world. But awakening does something brutal. It rips off the mask. Suddenly, you're no longer trying to impress anyone. You're not competing because you see the game. And here lies the problem. Without the mask, your old goals don't make sense anymore. They were custom-tailored for a version of you that died. So now you're like an actor who walked off stage in the middle of the play and can't remember their lines. It's not that you lost motivation. You outgrew the fuel that fed it. Carl Jung believed, we're not here to serve the ego. We're here to integrate it. align it with something much greater. He named this process individuation, the journey of transforming a fragmented identity into a whole, unified self. Not the small self that wants praise and external validation, but the self with a capital S, the transpersonal center of your psyche that connects with everything. And this self doesn't care about status or approval or even mental clarity. It's here to express truth. So once awakening happens, your psyche begins to completely recalibrate. It starts rejecting anything false, forced, or ego-based. This includes jobs, relationships, ambitions, and even that vision board you made in 2021. That's why people often describe awakening as both liberating and disorienting at the same time. But Jung warned, if we stop here, we get stuck. Some people awaken and fall into the trap of spiritual bypassing. They convince themselves that nothing matters, that it's all just illusion. So they disconnect, float, and emotionally numb themselves. They confuse detachment with total disengagement. But the self wants something completely different. It wants to live through you. It wants to bring heaven into this human body. It doesn't reject the physical world. It redefines your role in it. But to enter this new role, you need to go through a strange intermediate phase that Jung described perfectly and that few people recognize while they're in it. There's a phase after awakening that almost nobody mentions. It's not glamorous and it doesn't get thousands of likes on social media. It doesn't look like meditating in Bali or writing profound quotes on Instagram. It looks like this, sitting in silence, unable to explain yourself while the world keeps racing around you. Carl Jung would say, you're not lost. You're in the in-between place. You've disidentified from the ego, but you haven't yet found a new way to live from the self. This space isn't failure. It's a rite of passage, but in our hyper-productive world, stillness is misdiagnosed as laziness. The pause is confused with total paralysis. So you judge yourself harshly, and that judgment blocks the very energy your soul is trying to call back. Jung had a technical term for this, psychological pause. He called it enantiodromia, the process where things transform into their opposite. When you awaken, your internal pendulum swings violently from ego-driven, striving to soul-level stillness. You go from, I need to do everything, to why do anything. And this swing isn't pathology, it's a sacred recalibration. It's how deep balance is restored in the psyche. In mythic traditions and ancient teachings, this is the phase of the hermit, the death before rebirth. It's the moment when the caterpillar turns into liquid soup inside the cocoon, no longer an insect, not yet a butterfly, just complete dissolution. And yes, during dissolution, you can't do anything productive. You don't hit goals, you melt. This is where the ego goes into absolute panic. It wants action, clear identity, and immediate direction. But the self is whispering something different. Let go of everything. I'm building something infinitely deeper. And here's where most modern spirituality completely fails. It teaches just follow your joy or keep your vibrations high. And while intention and energy matter, Carl Jung would tell you something radically different. If you try to skip the darkness, you lose the gold. He believed that shadow integration, facing the repressed, rejected, and uncomfortable parts of yourself isn't optional. It's not spiritual extra credit. It's the core curriculum of becoming a whole, individuated human being. This sacred nothingness you're feeling is exactly the space where the unconscious can finally emerge. You're not failing. You're metabolizing decades of social, familial, and cultural conditioning, and your psyche is infinitely wiser than you imagine. It will deliberately pause your motivation, your mental clarity, your access to defined purpose, to force you to feel, witness, and integrate what you've buried in the unconscious for years. This is the real work that nobody wants to do because it hurts. And here's where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered 3 distinct psychological stages that happen after awakening, and most people get completely stuck in the second stage without ever being able to move forward. Stage 1. Ego disidentification. You wake up from the illusion, see through social conditioning, recognize the psychological games. It feels like total freedom at first. Stage 2. The sacred void. Your old ego-based motivation dies, but the new self-based motivation hasn't been born yet. You're in deep psychological limbo. This is where 90% of people give up, thinking something is terribly wrong with them. Stage 3. Emergence of the self. A new source of motivation arises, but it doesn't come from the small ego. It comes from something Jung called the self, with a capital S, the transpersonal and archetypal center of your psyche that connects you with something much greater than yourself. But here's the crucial detail that almost nobody understands about stage 2. In ancient mystical and spiritual traditions, this phase has specific names. In Sufism, it's called fana, the annihilation of the ego before spiritual resurrection. In Christian mysticism, it's the dark night of the soul that St. John of the Cross described. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth. All these traditions recognize that there's a necessary and inescapable void on the spiritual path. Jung didn't invent this. He translated millennial wisdom into modern psychological language, and he was clear: you can't skip this phase. Trying to skip it guarantees you'll be stuck in it for years, if not decades. The only way out is through complete surrender to the dissolution process. And here comes the twist that changes absolutely everything. When you stop resisting the void, when you finally surrender to the process without trying to fix it or speed it up, something unexpected and almost magical starts to happen. Motivation returns, but it's completely different this time. It's not anxious, it's not performative, it's not based on fear of failure or the need to prove something. It's something much older and deeper. A kind of soul-guided movement that feels like remembering rather than forced achievement. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as a living internal compass that begins to guide you. And modern science is starting to understand this too. Neuroplasticity studies show that when we stop forcing results and enter states of deep receptivity, completely different areas of the brain activate. The default mode network, responsible for insights, creativity, and connection with purpose, finally has space to operate. So you've crossed the void. You felt the uncomfortable silence, the anguishing pause, the total dissolution of your old identity. And now something genuinely new is awakening within you. Not like a dramatic lightning bolt or spiritual fireworks, more like a silent, magnetic gravitational pull. Not to return to your old life that no longer fits, but to build a completely new one from scratch. This is where the self begins to speak, not through words or direct commands, but through subtle nudges, through visceral resonance, through what Jung called the symbolic life. He deeply believed that once the ego surrenders and the unconscious is consciously integrated, you become capable of living from a place infinitely deeper than superficial personality. Life stops being about mere survival or external accumulation and becomes about real meaning and authentic expression. And there's a counterintuitive and surprising detail here. This new self-guided motivation is often strangely ordinary. When the self leads your life, you don't chase frantically. You respond with presence. You're not moved by FOMO or fear of falling behind. You're guided by deep alignment with what's true for you. You don't desperately pursue mental clarity. You recognize it naturally when it appears at the right time. Living from the self doesn't mean you'll always feel motivated in the traditional, cultural sense. You'll still have waves of physical tiredness, mental confusion, even emotional grief. That's simply part of being an embodied human. But what completely disappears is that torturous feeling of constant internal betrayal. That feeling of dragging yourself through a life that no longer belongs to you, that no longer reflects who you really are. If you've made it this far, and this resonated deeply in your soul, I need you to do something important now. Leave the word recalibrate in the comments. I want to map exactly how many people are going through this process right now to create even more specific and targeted content for this crucial phase. Your word in the comments helps me understand what you most need to hear in the next videos. In place of that internal betrayal, you start noticing completely different patterns emerging. You're naturally drawn to create even when nobody is watching or validating. You say no easily to things that don't resonate in your soul, even if they look amazing on paper or bring social status. You follow your genuine curiosity, not an externally imposed checklist. You choose inner peace instead of external performance. This is the new fuel of your life. It's not the addictive adrenaline of the ego. It's a deep, sustainable alignment with the self. Jung called this state living symbolically, not living in fantasy or escapism, but living with soul fully present. You begin to genuinely trust your internal images, your nighttime dreams, the synchronicities that appear, your visceral instincts as a real and reliable compass. And in day-to-day practice, this transforms absolutely everything. The questions you ask change radically. Instead of asking what should I do to be successful, you ask what is quietly calling me now. Instead of what's the perfect plan, you ask where is life gently nudging me. Instead of how do I prove my worth to the world, you ask what feels deeply true and honest now. You stop trying to master and control life with willpower and start dancing with it in conscious partnership. And this doesn't mean abandoning all ambition or desire for achievement. It means transforming it completely at the root. Ego-driven ambition transforms into soul-driven devotion. Devotion to truth, to full presence, to real and non-performative growth. And the beautiful irony is that this kind of aligned energy accomplishes infinitely more than forced ego ever did. But now it's sustainable long-term. Now it comes from the deep soul, not from the fear of not being enough. This is the authentic motivation of the self, not to impress people or collect external validations, but to express your unique truth. And it usually leads you to create, serve, heal, teach, and build meaningful things. Not because you should do this to look good, but because your whole integrated being says yes from the inside out. So if you've been feeling that your vital spark has completely disappeared after awakening, understand this deeply. The old superficial fire had to burn down to ashes completely, so you could finally find a much deeper and truer flame. A flame that doesn't easily go out when external winds and life's storms blow hard. Carl Jung never promised that the path of individuation would be easy or comfortable. And if you're here listening to this until the end now, you're already walking courageously on this transformative path. It's not about recovering your old superficial motivation based on fear and ego. It's about discovering a completely new motivation rooted in the totality of your being, not in social performance, not in the fear of rejection, but in the truth of your soul. This isn't the end of your spiritual awakening. It's the true beginning of your becoming real and whole. And if you want to continue unraveling these deep layers of the psyche, the soul, Jungian individuation in ways that really make sense applied to real life, subscribe to the channel now. There's a complete journey mapped out here that can consciously guide you through each phase of this transformative process. Save this video to your playlist to listen again in exactly 7 days, because on the second listen it will make even more sense and you'll catch layers that went unnoticed now. And share this video with someone you know is in this phase right now, lost in the post-awakening fog without understanding what's happening. Because spiritual awakening isn't the end of your life's story. It's where the true and authentic story finally begins to be written by your soul.